Welcome, midnight listeners. Tonight we drift into a chapter of history that most would rather forget. A dry breeze drags the salt of the Saronic Gulf through the narrow alleys of Athens. You can almost taste it. It mixes with the stench of refuse and something else, something new that no one has yet named. Beneath the Parthenon's shadow, the city swells. Walls tighten, gates close. War has driven the people inward, villagers, farmers, livestock, all pressed together behind the long walls of Athens, a cage of their own making. And now, a ship, just one. It slips into the Piraeus port without fanfare, carrying cargo crew and an invisible guest. Not gods, not glory, something else. The crew coughs, a few stumble. A child cries and is quickly silenced. The captain walks off the gangplank and collapses before he speaks a word. This is how it begins, not with a scream, but with the silence of lungs that no longer open. Before we drift deeper, consider marking this video for those who fall asleep. Best beside forgotten truths. Subscribe if you return nightly to the quiet horror of history. Let me know your local time. And if you're still awake at the end, now exhale and let history's cold breath settle on your skin. You are there. You have arrived. You walk among the crowded streets of Athens, a city too proud to notice it has already been condemned. From every doorway someone peeks out, afraid of what might come, but still hoping it won't come for them. You hear that a sickness is moving through the harbor, and then you hear nothing, because those who speak of it stop speaking altogether. Their families board up their homes not to keep sickness out, but to keep what's inside from escaping. You pass a priest who mutters a prayer, then bites his tongue to draw blood, an old ritual. The gods must be angry, he says. Something impure. Perhaps a foreign curse. Perhaps the Spartans. But none dare say it too loudly. War already eats at the walls. Then the coughing begins, not your own. A neighbor, 2 homes over, then another. It is dry at first, harmless, almost polite, but it deepens, wet and raw, flecked with blackened bile. Children cry for mothers who no longer answer. Eyes redden, skin burns. And then the smell. You can't name it, but it clings to everything. Sweat, blood, decay, and something fouler like burnt leather soaked in vinegar. You try to look away, but the city is small now. Too many faces packed too close. You step over a man lying in the road. You think he is sleeping. You know he is not. The agora still bustles, but it's not commerce anymore. It's desperation. Women claw for grain. Men fight for vinegar. One man stabs another over a water skin, but no one intervenes. No one speaks. Some still gather outside the temples. They chant. They pour oil. They make sacrifice. But the statues remain as still as ever. No signs come. No rain. No voice. Only smoke that coils upward and disappears. You wake in the night and your throat is dry. Not sore yet, but you wonder. You always wonder now. In the morning, someone has scratched a message into your door. Stay inside. Burn the clothes. You haven't seen your cousin in 2 days. His wife doesn't open the door. You knock once, then you leave. The city fills with murmurs that it came from Egypt or Libya, or the gods, or the stars, that it was punishment, that it was fate, that it was no different than a fever, that it was different, entirely different. But you see it in their eyes. The priests no longer believe their own rites. The healers wash their hands in wine, then in urine, then in nothing. They stop counting the sick. They stop writing their names. And then there are the watchers, The ones who sit by windows and watch the street, all day, all night. You realize you have become one of them. You can feel the city holding its breath. But it is too late. The breath has already been drawn, and it carries something inside. In your sleep you hear coughing. In your dreams you hear weeping. And in the moments between you wonder if the gods were ever listening. You watch prayers darken into curses as temples empty into silence. The streets still echo with footsteps, but they no longer carry intention. You see people walking without direction, some barefoot, some still in fine robes now soaked in their own waste. Their eyes are glassy unfocused. They walk toward the temples, but not to worship. Not anymore. You follow one group past the temple of Hephaestus. A woman drops to her knees and places her child on the altar. The boy is not breathing. His lips are blue. She does not speak. She doesn't cry. She just sits. A priest watches from a doorway. He does not step forward. He clutches a scroll to his chest like a shield and turns away. You realize now that the gods are being abandoned, not because they failed to answer, but because they've gone silent for too long. No wind stirs the incense. No flame flickers unprovoked. The pigeons that once nested among the statues have disappeared. The temple grounds smell of sour oil and rotting meat. Sacrifices have been left too long unattended, unburned. You step inside the sanctuary of Athena. Her stone eyes seem dimmer now. Someone has scrawled words in charcoal on the base of her statue. You do not read them aloud. You understand they are not meant for the living. People still come to pray, but they do not kneel anymore. They shout. They demand. A man tears his chiton bleeding from the chest and screams into the sacred flame. He's ignored by both priest and statue. By nightfall, the temples become shelter. Not sacred space, but desperate ones. The sick drag themselves across marble floors, pressing their faces to cool stone. Some die beneath frescoes of triumph. Some die clutching holy relics. And the gods remain silent. You remember when worship was orderly, when people lined up to offer figs, olives, wine. Now the shrines are littered with bones. You see a dog gnawing on something behind the altar. You do not look closely. Children cry out in their sleep, and their mothers press their mouths shut in fear the noise will attract something. Not a god. Something worse, the attention of men who have given up pretending to be human. You hear of a priestess who tore her eyes out in the temple of Apollo. You never confirm if it's true. It doesn't matter. The story spreads faster than fire, and no one goes near that altar anymore. One man claims the gods are being punished too, that they've been made mortal, that somewhere Dionysus is coughing up blood and Hera can't lift her arms. The others laugh, then they cough, then they stop laughing. In dreams you see temples burning. In waking you see them empty. A silence takes hold, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that arrives after all hope has been scraped away. You hear no hymns, you smell no incense. The sacred becomes mundane, then neglected, then defiled. You walk past the temple of Poseidon and see a family sleeping inside a broken column. The father has stacked stones into a wall to block the wind. You ask if they need anything. They look through you. You see a woman slap her child for saying Zeus. You see a man spit at the feet of a priest. You hear laughter when lightning strikes. In a corner of the agora, someone lights a fire with torn scrolls, sacred texts. A philosopher protests, but no one listens to philosophers anymore. One morning, the bells stop ringing. You don't know when exactly it happened. You only realize it later when you notice the quiet and the way your own breathing feels loud. Historians still wonder whether the plague broke faith or revealed its emptiness. Some say it was a crisis of theology. Others say it was inevitability. But you were there. You remember how fast the gods faded from conversation, how quickly their names became ashes in the mouth. You pass by a temple one last time. You don't stop. You don't pray. You simply keep walking. The air tastes of copper and ash. The sun seems to avoid the marble now. You begin to wonder if the gods had ever been listening, or if they too had turned their faces away. Order collapses quietly, like cloth unraveling in the rain. The city does not fall in flames. It falls in whispers. You begin to notice the absence of things long before you notice what has replaced them. The water stops flowing from the fountains. The baker's stall is shuttered not for a day, but forever. A familiar face vanishes from your street, and no one asks where he went. You see bodies wrapped in blankets left on doorsteps with small tokens, a coin, a sprig of thyme, a worn pendant. The dead are no longer names. They are burdens to be removed. You pass the assembly and hear nothing. The orators are gone. The great voices of Athenian democracy have either fled sickened or fallen silent. The stones of the Pnyx grow moss in the absence of speech. The law still exists in theory, but you watch a man steal a cart of olives and no one stops him, not because they agree, but because no one wants to touch him. He coughs as he runs. That is enough. A group of boys stone a sick woman by the gate. You hear the dull thuds from a distance. When you approach, they've already scattered, and her body is a shape covered in dust and bruises. No one moves her. You look for the city guard. They are gone. Or maybe they have thrown away their uniforms. It is hard to tell who has given up pretending. The agora becomes a graveyard of goods. Rotten fruit, overturned baskets, shattered urns. People move through it like ghosts scavenging with their eyes lowered. No one speaks unless forced to. Every conversation begins with, "Are you clean?" Families no longer bury their dead. They drag them to pyres hastily built on the outskirts, light the flame, and leave before the smoke rises too high. Sometimes the fire does not catch. Sometimes the body remains. You begin to recognize the look, sunken eyes clenched, jaw hands trembling, not from fear, but from the effort of still caring. That look doesn't last long. It fades into numbness. One man sits in the street playing a flute. The sound is broken, breathless, and out of tune, but no one stops him. It's the only music you've heard in days. The plague has not just taken lives, it has taken the idea of structure, of city, of civilization. At night, fires bloom on rooftops. You never know who starts them. You stop asking. The flames no longer signal disaster, only another thing that must be endured. One morning, you wake to screaming. A man is stabbing his wife in the street. He says she has the fever. He says her eyes are wrong. He says she tried to curse him in his sleep. You don't intervene. Neither does anyone else. You hear stories. A father eating his dead son's ration. A mother leaving her newborn beside the altar still alive. A boy who drowns himself in a cistern after watching his entire household fall one by one. But the stories don't shock anymore. They are told without urgency, pass between the living like bread gone stale. In some neighborhoods, people paint marks on their doors, red for sick, black for dead, white for already looted. A group of men walks the streets with torches. They chant nonsense, not prayers, not politics, just sound repetition, a rhythm to block out the silence. You follow them once, but they disappear down a narrow alley and you never see them again. Historians still wonder how many died in this collapse, not just from the fever, but from the violence, the starvation, the silence. There are no records. The scribe stopped writing. The wax tablets were repurposed for fuel. You find yourself forgetting names, not from illness but from disuse. People become shapes, then shadows, then empty air. A boy offers to sell you his father's sandals. You ask where his father is. He points to the sandals. You begin to move differently, shoulders hunched, eyes down, breath held when passing others. It is not fear. It is protocol. A new etiquette of plague. Once someone calls your name, you do not turn. It is safer that way. You still smell the rot from Section 2. It follows you. It lingers in your hair, your clothes, the back of your throat. The city is not dead. Not yet. But it is unraveling. Not in panic, not in fire, but in quiet, hopeless decay. Bodies pile too fast to burn, and too many are left to be found. You leave your home and see a hand reaching out from beneath a sheet in the street. The rest of the body is still the skin, a yellow-grey. You don't stop. You've stepped over too many hands by now. In the early days there were rituals, coins on eyes, incense, chants whispered over shallow graves. That is gone. The city has grown too full of the dead, and too empty of those with strength enough to care for them. You hear carts rolling at dawn, not carrying grain, not carrying goods, just corpses. They creak across the stone stacked high with bodies draped in linen rags or nothing at all. Sometimes the carts tip. No one picks up the fallen. The pyres burn day and night now, but still cannot keep pace. Ash falls like grey snow over the rooftops. Children draw shapes in it, then forget why they started. You see a girl carrying her sister in her arms. She sets the body down at the temple steps and walks away barefoot. You watch her leave. She doesn't look back. Soon the firewood runs out. Athens has no forests left to offer. People burn furniture, doors, scrolls. You hear of a family that burned their own floor to cremate a son. They sleep in dirt now. The stench changes. It is no longer something noticed. It is something you live inside. It coats your tongue. It drips from the walls. Dogs vanish, then cats, then the birds fall silent. You hear rats at night chewing, and then come the piles, not placed with care, just dumped anywhere space allows. Alleys, wells, corners of public baths. You walk past one and recognize a face barely. The skin is blackened, the mouth open as if still gasping. You do not stop. You hear of scavengers picking through the dead, not to mourn, to take. Rings, belts, sandals, teeth. One day you see a body in your neighbor's doorway. You knock. No one answers. You know they're all gone or too sick to care. You do not knock again. There is no burial now. There is only exposure, fire, and forgetting. You hear of people throwing corpses into wells. The water turns thick. People drink anyway. Once you watch a pyre burn too slowly, a leg slips loose from the stack. Someone moves to push it back in with a stick. No one speaks. The fire pops. A man nearby begins to laugh. It is not joy. It is the last part of his mind crumbling under the weight of too much death. The Agora hosts a new kind of market. For bribes, for bodies, for lies. You hear someone offering to smuggle the healthy out of the city for a price. You ask where they would go. The man shrugs. One family builds a wall inside their home, sealing off the sick from the well. It buys them a few extra days. Then they begin coughing too. You find a child curled under an abandoned ox cart holding a doll made from straw and bone. You ask where her parents are. She stares past you. Historians still wonder whether the sheer volume of death was exaggerated by Thucydides. Some argue the numbers were inflated, others believe they were undercounted. But you were there. You know the truth lies in the smell, not the numbers. Priests no longer bless the pyres, they are too few, or too afraid. You see a woman singing as she lights the bodies, a lullaby, maybe for her child, maybe for herself. There is no longer a difference between the sacred and the obscene. Both lie smouldering in the same ash. You stop trying to avoid the dead. You walk around them when you can, step over them when you must. Sometimes you no longer notice until the crunch under your foot reminds you. At night, you dream of fire, not raging, just smouldering, always smouldering. By day you cough, you taste iron. You do not tell anyone. You lie to yourself saying it is dust. But you know, you always know. You see the plague reach its cold fingers into the heart of a war hero. The news spreads not with urgency, but with fatigue. Pericles is sick. You hear it in the way people speak now, less like a tragedy, more like a confirmation. Of course he is. Of course the one who tried to hold Athens together would fall with the rest. You remember when his voice filled the assembly rich and sure. Now, it is a whisper behind a shuttered door somewhere in the heart of the city. No one knows exactly where he is kept, only that he breathes still, and then not. You walk past the statues that once bore his face. They still smile, carved in stone. The man behind them, however, grows pale thin, and finally still. Pericles, strategos, builder of empires, guardian of Athenian pride, dead. There is no funeral, not as it should be, no speech, no ceremony. His sons had already died, both of them, one after the other. He outlived them by days, maybe weeks. Time feels warped now. A third son, born of a foreign woman, is hastily legitimized to carry the name. A whisper of lineage, a gesture against the wind. You feel no shift in the air when he dies. The city doesn't scream, it sighs. A long, breathless exhale that never quite becomes silence. He was the last symbol of order, of ambition, of beauty, now gone like marble cracking beneath a slow frost. And what follows is worse. Not just the sickness, but the opening. The space where dignity used to live. Leaders rise quickly now, loud voices, sharp promises. You watch men with no experience seize control, not because they are capable, but because they are the last left standing. You hear of Cleon the tanner shouting in the assembly. His words are fierce. The people cheer. It is not reason they want now, but heat. Something to burn away the rot, even if it burns them too. Justice twists. Trials grow shorter. Accusations require no proof. Someone looks sick, gone. Someone speaks against the city's glory, gone. The plague no longer kills alone. It teaches others how to kill more cleanly. You see neighbors betray each other. A woman offers her healthy niece to the militia in exchange for protection. A merchant poisons a rival's well, claiming it was mercy. Even philosophers begin to abandon principle. You hear one say, "In times of death, logic is luxury." You watch people gather to chant Pericles' name, not in praise, but in blame. They say he built the walls that trapped them, that his greatness brought divine punishment, that the gods destroyed the man to humble the city. You wonder if they believe it, or if belief has become too costly. Historians still wonder whether Pericles died of the plague itself, or complications, fever, dysentery, despair. Some say his death was the end of the golden age. Others argue the age had already rotted. He simply happened to fall last. You recall a speech he gave once about Athens' virtue, its strength, its brilliance in the face of hardship. The words sound hollow now, even in memory. not because they were false, but because they were too fragile. In the marketplace, someone sells fragments of his speeches written in charcoal on scraps of wood. You see a child using one as a fan. You begin to understand that greatness dies no louder than anything else. It withers, coughs, and disappears. A friend tells you they saw Pericles' body being carried through the alleys at night, wrapped in plain cloth. No procession, no mourners, just two men and a cart. You do not ask if it is true. You already know it is. The city keeps moving, though you're no longer sure what city means. You walk by the Parthenon. It still stands. Columns still gleam in the sun, but no one looks up anymore. You hear laughter again, not joyful, not even mad, just empty. A release of air, like the sound a mouth makes when it forgets how to pray. And as you watch the flames consume yet another pyre, you realize even the best of men cannot hold back a tide that moves without form, without reason, without mercy. The hero is dead. The gods are silent. The streets remain. But you no longer walk them with hope, only with memory. When the dying ends, the city forgets who it used to be. No bell marks the final death. No trumpet sounds when the last pyre cools. You only notice it gradually. The way the air no longer trembles with coughing. The way footsteps sound louder now, unsoftened by moans and weeping. And yet, it's not relief you feel. It's something flatter, thinner, emptiness. You walk the streets and realize you no longer look for faces. You've stopped expecting to recognize anyone. The names that once meant something, friends, neighbors, mentors, have dissolved into a blur. You pass a home once filled with music. Now the door hangs loose. The roof collapsed. Inside nothing but wind. The city has survived. That's what they say. Athens endures. But it's a city wearing the skin of its former self. Thin, brittle, haunted. New buildings rise, not temples, not schools, not theaters. Storage, walls, barracks. As if the city now expects only more war, more fire. You visit the agora. It's filled again, but not with laughter or trade. People speak in short bursts, their eyes scanning over shoulders. Bartering has returned, but without joy. Money changes hands like it's been poisoned. A child throws a stone into the empty fountain. It echoes. No one reacts. You notice that no one tends the altars anymore. The statues remain covered in soot and bird droppings. Athena's eyes are blind with dust. The gods have not returned. Historians still wonder why the plague burned out. Some credit herd immunity. Others suggest it mutated, lost its virulence. But here, in these narrow streets, you know, it simply grew tired. Not of killing, but of being noticed. Some say Athens learned from the plague, that its democracy adapted, that it hardened, evolved. But you were there. You remember how nothing was learned, only endured. You see men arguing about rebuilding, about vengeance against Sparta, about reclaiming honor. Their words are loud, but their eyes are hollow. They build monuments to distraction. A stonecutter carves a new inscription near the temple steps. It lists no names, only a number 100,000. You don't know who wrote it. You don't know if it's true. You do know this. No one comes to weep beside it. The sickness is gone, but the fear remains. It coils under the skin, waiting. When someone coughs, even now, the silence returns. A pause in breath, a quick glance. The old ghost stirred again. You pass a window and see your own reflection. You look older, thinner, less alive, not sick, but not untouched. The city speaks a new language now. One of shrugs, narrowed eyes, silence in place of greeting. A culture of retreat. You hear someone laughing too loudly in a tavern. No one joins in. Someone drops a plate. The crash startles everyone. For a moment, it's like the dead have returned. You sit on a broken column watching shadows stretch across the stones. A cat slinks past. You haven't seen one in weeks. Is that hope, or just another ghost returning? You do not know what year it is, only that it is after the fever, after the fire, after the forgetting. There are no more funerals, only habits, no more speeches, only slogans, no more gods, only statues. You still smell ash in the morning. Whether it's real or memory no longer matters. One day someone will write about this. They'll give it a name, a start, an end. They won't know how it felt, but you do. You remember the silence. You remember the rot. You remember the way a city died without ever being buried. The dying ended, but the forgetting began. Athens, the brilliant, the bold, was never meant to rot from within. But no sword pierced its heart, only breath and time and silence. You remember a city of learning of light, but that city was left unguarded when the gods stopped answering. And what replaced it was not ruin but numbness. The survivors built again, but not in reverence, in reflex. Structures rose not out of vision, but habit, because movement was easier than memory. No names were chiseled for the unclaimed dead, no rituals restored. The ghost became part of the air, inhaled, forgotten. Only one thing endures the number. Whispered, estimated, denied. 100,000. They did not all die in flames. Most died in silence. And silence like dust clings forever to the places it's left. So if you walk those streets today, beneath the Acropolis through the market ruins, you won't hear their voices, but the stillness, that's them. The stillness is where they sleep. Welcome, seekers of forgotten horrors. Tonight, we plunge into a chapter of history stained with ritual bloodletting, iron justice, and a queen whose appetite for control was only matched by her mastery of pain. The winds of ancient Persia carry whispers of her name, often silenced by fear, but never erased. You step into a palace where law is sharpened like a blade, and mercy has been buried beneath polished stone. You're in the court of Queen Azamdokht, though some sources dispute the name, and others argue her title. But what remains undisputed is this: there once ruled a woman in the twilight years of the Sasanian Empire, who made torture sacred law into pain and loyalty into suffering. Before we descend further, consider marking this video for those who dare to witness history's true brutality. Subscribe if you crave these forgotten truths. Post your location and local time below a chilling reminder that you, unlike her victims, are still safe for now. Now steel your nerves, prepare for discomfort, and let the grim echoes of the past consume us. You stand at the gates of Ctesiphon, where banners drip red in the morning heat. Inside, the daughter of a slain king sharpens her revenge like a ritual blade. Her brothers are dead, one poisoned, one burned alive in a ceremonial cauldron. No proof ties her hand to those deaths, yet no one dares to challenge her ascension. Historians still fiercely debate whether her rise was legally sanctioned or staged through ceremonial deceit. But you see the bodies left in her wake advisors who hesitated too long, cousins whose loyalty arrived too late. You're forced to bow as she enters her first court session. Her garments glitter with sewn-on flakes of gold and dried blood. She smiles only once when a prisoner screams under the lash for calling her daughter instead of divine ruler. From this moment forward, you understand the rules have changed. The queen has turned succession into a sacrament of suffering. You are present at the first midnight judgment. The accused is a woman, a rival noble's sister dragged through the public square and bound beneath the queen's balcony. Her sentence, let the earth drink her secrets. The phrase confuses you at first until the executioners begin digging. The woman is buried alive upside down, feet first, her muffled screams mixing with wet earth. The queen watches, eating dates with the surgeons calm. Word spreads quickly. The throne is no longer a seat of power. It is a blade pressed gently against every throat. Families burn their family trees to avoid being linked to the queen's enemies. Children are taught to answer questions with silence. You would not have survived this. Even as a bystander, your eyes alone would have sentenced you to pain. Then comes the reorganization edict. You see its delivery, a thick parchment nailed to the doors of temples and courts. It declares that suffering is the purifying fire of treason, and that all government offices shall include an agent of the pain rite, a position responsible for selecting appropriate torment for disobedience. From taxation to temple attendance, each law now carries a physical consequence. And the queen insists on witnessing random punishments herself, often sipping fermented rosewater, while the punishments unfold. The first to resist this edict is a court musician accused of sarcasm. You watch as he's silenced with a red-hot iron shaped like a treble clef, branded into his tongue, until he convulses. The queen simply asks, does his silence sound sweeter? This is not madness. It is method. Brutality shaped into bureaucracy. Her court functions as both a legislative body and a theatre of pain. Even her court scribes now wear gloves to avoid touching impure parchment used in sentencing. It's rumored that the ink used to record the condemned is mixed with human bone dust. The queen doesn't just kill her enemies, she ritualizes them. On the 6th month of her reign, you witness the decanting where the skulls of executed traitors are hollowed out, filled with wine, and handed to loyal generals. They drink without blinking, not because they want to, but because they know not to refuse. A general who hesitated once had his eyelids removed so he'd never blink again. And still she smiles. By the end of that first year, the throne is unchallenged. But the air in Ctesiphon changes. Music is banned. Mirrors removed from homes. Laughter becomes rare and often fatal. You see a servant whisper a joke behind a veil and disappear before nightfall. A neighbor pretends not to notice. You pretend not to breathe. In this court, fear is not a side effect. It is policy. The queen signs each decree with a thorn dipped in her own blood. And you realize this, her true rise, didn't begin when she claimed the throne. It began the first time someone screamed and she called it order. You awaken to silence. But silence in the capital is never peaceful. It's controlled, mandated. You walk through a plaza where each stone seems to echo, not your footsteps, but the absence of others. The queen has banned idle speech. You pass a young merchant who taps his knuckles twice before speaking a ritualized signal that his words are permitted. Failure to do so once led to his brother's tongue being nailed to a judicial tablet. Now you enter the heart of the queen's new system, the chamber of red ink, a bureaucratic hall where laws are rewritten, literally, in blood. You see it for yourself. Each decree penned using ink mixed with goat's bile and human plasma, symbolically binding flesh to law. The queen's scribes wear red-tinted robes not for show, but because the parchment bleeds when touched. The code she enforces is no mere scroll, it's a doctrine of suffering made physical. They call it the law of nails and needles, a new code where punishments are no longer tied to crime, but to emotional resonance. A tax evader might endure 10 days of glass walking. A minor heretic could be ordered to sit in boiling milk believed to soften the spiritual cartilage. There is no appeal process, only scaling severity. Historians still fiercely debate whether this system was an elaborate myth, a metaphor exaggerated by Persian chroniclers. But those who wrote about it didn't live long. You're there when a father pleads mercy for his son accused of sleeping during a court hymn. The queen orders concordance pain the son must endure whatever punishment the father cannot withstand. A pit is prepared. First, the father is submerged in icy brine for 1 hour. His screams are unbearable, but the queen watches impassive. When he collapses, the son is dragged forward. Balance is restored, she says. This is not punishment, it's ideology. Pain becomes proof of loyalty, and surviving it, a mark of favor. You meet a noblewoman with no fingernails left, rewarded with land. You see a former spy whose eyelids are sewn open, placed in charge of border security. Torture becomes a test, and pain a currency. And then come the black nails, a decree delivered in carved obsidian. Under this law, every household must submit a weekly confession of inner disloyalties. Husbands write suspicions about wives. Children report on parents. Denial is seen as concealment. Fabricated accusations are common, but the queen welcomes them. Lies she claims reveal the truth you're too afraid to name. You stand in the courtyard when an entire district is punished for failing to report a single blasphemer. The punishment. Each household is forced to submit a family member to the field of pins, a space lined with upright needles, where they must crawl while chanting praise. Most lose blood within minutes. Some never leave. You notice the queen observing from behind a veil of gold thread, unmoving, her lips pressed shut. And now comes the ritual enforcement. Each execution, each punishment is recited as the confirmation of order by palace clerics. Their job is to read the legal code aloud over each cry, each mutilation. If a cry interrupts the cleric, the punishment restarts. One scribe, unable to complete the chant due to a stutter, was assigned his own skin to transcribe upon. By the second year of her reign, the queen's laws have taken on lives of their own. Travelers speak of villages that carry out amputations without orders, just in case she's watching. Cities near the Eastern Front build pain halls beside courthouses. You see people carving proverbs about agony into their own walls. One reads, "Bleed now or bleed later." She sees either way. You begin to understand the deeper horror. Her laws are not just tools of power, they're infections. They spread by fear, mutate through obedience. The queen doesn't need to be present. Her pain becomes viral. You watch a city gate open not by key, but by an embedded ritual. A child is lightly burned on the hands every morning to ensure purity of passage. This isn't rebellion. This is compliance born from dread. The law has become culture, and worse, it's become belief. Even religion is not spared. The high priests, once autonomous interpreters of divine will, are brought to court in silence. You see them again, days later, lips sewn shut with iron thread. The queen replaces sermons with suffering chants, long droning rituals where pain replaces prayer. A man breaks his own finger to join the chorus. And there, in the midst of all this, you spot a child, not more than 10, repeating the queen's pain code by heart. He recites it with pride. A generation is growing up without the concept of innocence. When the queen revises the code again, adding the infamous grief clause, which allows punishment based solely on the emotional reaction of observers, you understand there is no law, only pain normalized. A man laughs nervously while witnessing a branding and is sentenced to emotional dissonance lashing. He survives, but never speaks again. You would not have survived this. The decree is short, but its shadow falls long. Let knowledge be felt through suffering. You stand before the temple of sacred tongues, once a library, now a charnel house. Inside, the Queen's decree unfolds like a plague. The scribes, once protectors of ancient medical scrolls, are led out barefoot into the square eyes smeared with oil, mouths sealed by wax. They do not scream. Yet. You hear the sharp hiss of heated bronze as rods are withdrawn from the fire. Their ends glow yellow-white. You don't have time to look away before the first scholar is blinded. The metal presses into his face with a searing kiss, and the stench of boiling eye jelly hits the air. You gag, but the Queen's disciples do not. They sing through it. She believes sensation is a divine messenger, and thus pain becomes ritual. Every whisper of dissent is rebranded as arrogance before the divine order, an arrogance she claims must be purified. Surgeons are forced to sever their own fingers before the court. Herbalists are stitched with poisonous vines and made to heal themselves through revelation. Some do by sheer madness. Others burst into wet convulsions mid-prayer. Historians still fiercely debate whether she genuinely believed pain transmitted wisdom or if it was calculated spectacle. What remains undisputed is this: her sacred pain trials became mandatory rites. No law could be passed without first being inscribed in flesh, meaning a councilman had to endure a symbolic wounding. Some took minor cuts, others carved treaties into their arms to prove loyalty. You see children forced to recite verses while kneeling on sharp pottery shards. Their voices tremble. Blood trickles down their ankles. When one boy falters, a priest calmly presses a stylus into the hollow, below his collarbone, until he remembers the next line. One day you watch a famed philosopher drag through the city, his tongue nailed to a plank, so that each bump of the cart tears it further. The reason he dared to ask if dreams were divine. He died silent, face frozen, in dumb agony, eyes speaking volumes she refused to hear. A secret school of mutilated healers emerges underground. They whisper teachings in the dark with burnt hands and scorched mouths. Many are captured and displayed, strung up by their surgical tools, hung upside down with scrolls shoved down their throats. The Queen walks past them during her daily procession, never once averting her gaze. Do you flinch when you hear her footsteps? Now you should. Her guards no longer wear armor. They wear stitched patches of truthful skin from the tongues of tortured poets. You've survived by saying nothing. But even silence is dangerous here. You walk deeper into the nightmare that is Al-Hakim's palace. But this time it is not the throne room or the dungeon that greets you. It is a garden, if you could still call it that, though nothing here grows naturally. Human torsos hang from iron vines like grotesque fruit. Their heads are gone, their limbs severed, and their skins stripped and dyed in hues of violet and yellow. The stench is unforgettable rot mixed with rare perfumes poured over flesh to slow decay. This is the flayed garden. Al-Hakim, they say, came here to meditate. You wouldn't call it meditation. You'd call it ritualized madness. Once a week, prisoners, usually scholars or scribes, were stripped alive and pinned to bronze trellises. Monks, under Al-Hakim's command, dressed in crimson robes, chanted verses backward, while an assistant poured salt into every bleeding edge. These monks were mathematicians once. Now they calculate pain like equations. You witness a ritual unfold. A man with white hair and ink-stained fingers is chained to a bench. He does not cry even as his abdomen is opened slowly, inch by inch, with surgical precision. A scribe nearby transcribes his facial reactions, cataloguing each blink, gasp, or flinch. Pain here is data. This is no longer torture for punishment. This is torture for understanding, for transformation. Al-Hakim's obsession with divine order, his claim to be the living manifestation of God, found expression through anatomical deconstruction. He believed the soul must be extracted through agony, that the spirit's exit could be timed, recorded, perhaps even controlled. Some believed these rituals could purify false beliefs, that if you tortured a Christian just enough, their blood would boil into truth, or a Jew's soul could be peeled free like a scroll. This wasn't unique to Al-Hakim, but he refined it. Historians still fiercely debate whether this was state policy or the whim of a singularly deranged monarch. There are scrolls suggesting similar practices occurred in Damascus and Fez around the same time, but nowhere else was it so ritualized, so theatrically systematic. One scholar who survived, but with tongue and eyes removed, scribbled with charcoal between floor cracks of his cell, "I have seen gardens where books once grew. You step forward and nearly slip, there is blood beneath the ivy." The most horrifying thing is the silence. No screams. Al-Hakim ordered the vocal cords of new victims cut before the ritual began. The garden is eerily quiet, except for the slow shuffle of monks and the splash of ladles filled with vinegar. You can't help but notice a bizarre symmetry in the bodies. They are arranged like a library, a flesh archive. Some scholars have argued this was intentional, that each victim symbolized a banned idea, one for astronomy, one for Aristotelian logic, one for wine poetry, and in the center of it all stood a statue, gold leaf over bone, allegedly built from the skeletons of 7 heretical philosophers, their spines forming the core. A bronze plaque on its base reads, "Only the broken man sees the full truth." You turn your gaze upward. Ravens sit on branches carved from femurs. They do not sing. You exit the garden shaken and cold, only to be led into what was once a library, or so the marble plaque above the arch says, though now it holds no books, only skulls. Thousands of them, stacked from floor to ceiling in obsessive geometric patterns. Some are scorched. Others are drilled with tiny holes tagged with copper wires hung from lattices. This is where Al-Hakim preserved thought. The skulls are sorted not by name but by ideology. A guide in dark silk gloves points silently. One column holds the astronomers. Next to it, Greek logicians. Then the wine poets and the scriptural doubters. Then, more simply, troublemakers. Each shelf is labeled in gold and bone. Al-Hakim believed knowledge should not be erased, but displayed in death. His cruelty was never chaotic. It was precise. The skulls were catalogued, numbered, indexed. Some had bronze plaques describing what theory or belief they held before execution. A few skulls are pierced with nails. Others wear iron crowns. Every choice meant something. You approach a skull with a melted edge. The plaque reads, "Refuse to believe the moon was divine." Another crushed almost flat belonged to a Persian theologian who once argued that pain did not bring spiritual clarity. His skull was used as a footstool in the prayer chamber. The deeper into the archive you walk, the more intricate it becomes. Tiny dioramas, recreations of debates Al-Hakim deemed heretical, are embedded between the skulls using puppet-like bones. In one, a bone hand points to a wax sun. In another, a jawless skull is forced to kneel before a golden book. Some call this room the Museum of Misbelief. Others simply call it the Chamber of Silence. Here a servant whispers Al-Hakim would sometimes sit in darkness for hours, sipping ink mixed with crushed lotus petals, claiming it allowed him to absorb the last thoughts of the scholars. But it didn't stop there. In a back alcove, you find a pit circular deep, and lined with fossilized vertebrae. A scroll nearby identifies it as the Well of Questions. It's where Al-Hakim tossed written arguments and scrolls he considered unsolvable. If no answer came to him in 40 days, he declared the topic cursed. Anyone caught speaking of it afterward was thrown in alive. You glance at a few scraps pinned to the wall. One asks, "Do animals have souls?" Another, "If the stars control fate, is God powerless?" Another, "Is it a sin to laugh at scripture?" None are answered. The more time you spend here, the more you realize. Al-Hakim didn't destroy knowledge because he feared it. He destroyed it because he wanted to own it, to bend it into submission, to mark it with blood and order, to make it silent. When you leave, your reflection lingers in a polished skull. It seems to smirk. You're led into the final hall. It is long, narrow, and almost empty except for its ceiling. There, painted in exquisite detail, is a map of the heavens. Al-Hakim had it commissioned after his purification of the astronomers. Every constellation is marked not by stars but by names, names of those who once dared to describe the sky in ways he found offensive. The constellation of Orion is labeled the arrogant. Cassiopeia is the laugher. Draco, the heretic. Each figure painted in blood-red ink with stars replaced by burning eyes. Al-Hakim believed the sky was not to be read, but to be obeyed. The stars whisper to the mind, he once wrote. But minds are dangerous. Let only one mind speak. That mind was his. In the center of the hall is a single chair carved from fossilized date palm and obsidian. Here, Al-Hakim would sit alone and listen to silence. For hours, days, sometimes weeks. A servant once recorded that the caliph spent 40 nights in this chair, eating nothing but vinegar-soaked figs and staring upward. Why? To commune with the dead, he said, to hear their thoughts ripple back from the void. You wonder in this moment what the scholars might say now, if their hollow skulls could whisper, if the ink he drank ever gave him what he wanted, if he truly understood what he had destroyed. Because Al-Hakim did not die in glory. No great battle, no martyrdom. One night, he rode out on his grey mule alone and vanished into the desert. Some say he became a hermit. Others say he was torn apart by wolves sent by God. Others believe he still lives hidden in the caves beneath the city, drinking ink in the dark. But the city never forgot. After his disappearance, his palace was sealed. Not looted, not burned, sealed, and only now reopened. You look back one last time as you step into the morning sun. The gates close behind you with a groan like bending bone. And for the first time you realize the skulls were not trophies. They were warnings. Al-Hakim ruled not by sword or scripture. He ruled by silence. And silence is loudest when it stares back at you.